we get experimental science. We're curious, non-judgmental.
Alright, y'all, we got a surprise animal for you. These are in fact mosquito larvae that are swimming around, and they will be developing into full-fledged mosquitoes should we let them. Where did I get them from? We had like a plant container outside. There were no plants in this. It's been raining a ton and it filled up with water. And that now has unlocked a bunch of mosquitoes around, and they laid into this container. So what I did was I collected a bunch of them from the water. Then I dumped out the water to nerf the rest of them because I don't want any mosquitoes. What? So Karen, what's your blood type? So Karen was wondering why they bite Karen so much. You don't know your blood type. Let's say your blood type is type O. Okay? And the reason I'm saying that is that's because that is their favorite blood type. So let's pretend that you're type O for the sake of argument. They do have a favorite. They don't seem to have a preference for the R positive, RH positive, or negative, but type O is their favorite. Do you wear dark clothing? I wear black shirts, dark blues. Does anyone here who get eaten by mosquitoes wear dark colored clothing when outside? Here's the fun part. They love dark colored clothing. It's been shown in many different studies that they actually go for certain colored clothing. In particular, darks. The clothing that you need to wear to keep them away is khaki. Apparently, that's their least favorite color clothing. Yeah, that's one thing. They do not like khaki colored clothing. Older larvae, so Golganak, they tend not to cannibalize, but there are mosquitoes that eat other mosquitoes. Assuming that we all have the same species in here, they should not eat one another. But that's a big assumption. And Noki, the ones that eat other mosquitoes don't suck blood. Those actually eat nectar, but then eat other larvae when they're in the larval stage, which is kind of cool. Zedman pointed out that they also go for sweat. So if you're outside running in dark colored clothing, I assume that you sweat if you run. That might be a horrible assumption on my part. That it makes you more attractive. Your skin microbiome. So Karen, on your skin, there's bacteria, right? And you don't want to get rid of these bacteria because they're beneficial bacteria for you, right? And for me and whoever has them. Everyone has slightly different populations as well. These bacteria, some are more attracted to mosquitoes than others. And there's no way to easily tell that without a genetic test to see what your microbe is. That is something that is attractive to mosquitoes. So those good bacteria, some of them are very attracted to mosquitoes. So depending on what populations you have in your skin, you become more attractive. Another reason that they might find you beautiful, so dark skin, yep. And actually it's the same reason why we think like clothing colors, like dark clothing colors and dark skin tones are also preferred to lighter tones. And that has to do with their vision. You can actually change that color preference if you change their vision genetically. They wouldn't release it. They're not planning on releasing those mosquitoes, but it was just a proof of concept as to why they like certain colors, and it turns out it's the photoreceptors that they have built into them. On top of that, you breathing makes you attracted to mosquitoes. So mosquitoes prefer the smell of carbon dioxide or CO2. So CO2 is attractive to a mosquito. So when you breathe out, they're going to come towards you. If you're running and you're breathing heavily or more heavily than when you're walking, you're releasing more CO2, you're even more attracted. KK, how long do they live? On the order of weeks, but it's different for different species. So some adult species don't eat, in fact. Others do. Most mosquitoes actually are pollinators. So about 1,000 species of mosquito, you're talking less than 50 suck blood. Most of them are pollinators, and if you rid the world of mosquitoes, you destroy the environment. These mosquitoes are probably prey to bats, dragonflies, and other critters like that. If you enjoy alcohol, and let's say this, you are outside on a hot summer day, you are wearing dark clothing, you're barbecuing, so you're a little sweaty, you're having a beer, that alcohol already makes you more attractive to the mosquitoes. The smell of ethanol brings mosquitoes to whatever source you're at. So if you are having an adult beverage item outside, you are more attracted to them. So clothing color, your blood type, your skin microbiome, how heavily you're breathing, if you're sweating or not, and if you're drinking any like alcoholic beverages, it also makes you attractive. And that's just the factors that we know of. Actually, another one, sorry, I forgot, is heat. Your body heat. The higher temperature you are makes you more attracted to mosquitoes as well. So actually, what's cool is in the lab, we can make a fake blood meal for them. So what you can do is you can set up a tube that has blood cycling through it. But that's not enough to get them attracted. You have to add in a CO2 emitter next to the blood source, as well as a heat sensor, like a heat emitter. And that's enough to trick the mosquitoes to feeding on this artificial setup for you. Karen, that shade isn't doing anything for you in terms of keeping the mosquitoes away. Which is frustrating, right? Because you, like, all these factors we just talked about, in theory should help, but a lot of those right are out of your control, especially like the temperature. So it basically just like, don't go outside and like don't do anything. One thing important that you can do is, if there is standing water around your property, empty it, pour it out, get rid of it. That's where mosquitoes lay eggs, and so if you have some around your property, that they will push that towards like they'll lay in there, and that will create an environment where they will thrive. What we could do that might be kind of neat, we could preserve them and make a glass slide out of them and see like a lot more detail of them. That might be something that we should do in the future, and that way we can squish them and put them under a microscope and see more detail, because they wouldn't be wiggling around, so we can do like the high res images as a possibility. Let's go over to another well. These are bigger, and actually y'all can see them eating. They're eating the algae in the water. See, they have like little mustaches that are moving. Right here, there's the internal organs moving. Y'all see that? You can see it eating. That feeding behavior is really cool. And so you can see like that's the proto-heart moving inside. So of most of the mosquitoes in the world, they do not suck blood. Most of them. Of the 1,000, only 50 are bloodsuckers. Those that aren't sucking blood are pollinators. So those are very important for the ecosystem. You can imagine if you nerf them, you would probably break apart a massive part of the ecosystem. But I do like the idea of curing them. So if you were able to cure the mosquitoes of the diseases that they carry, yes, they'd still be very irritating when they bite us, but you can imagine a situation where, you know, if they move on, if they swim along, they move along, they bite us, yes, that's annoying, but we won't get like West Nile, Zika, malaria, dengue, and the list goes. There's even actually on Friday, but for Science News, there is a new flesh-eating bacteria in southern Australia, and it turns out that is transmitted by mosquitoes. Study was interesting because no one knew what was transmitting it. Folks thought it was like opossums were one of the carriers to humans, but the numbers didn't add up, and it was hypothesized there must have been something else carrying this flesh-eating disease. And it turns out that mosquitoes are the actual vector carrying them. But it's mosquitoes were the vectors down there as well. Ooh, that looks really cool. So those little circles down below are the algae that came up with the water. And then we're readily able to see the eyes. The eyes are much brighter than the rest of the animal. So the end of the tail, Karen, is actually what they breathe through. This stage of this animal breathes through the butt. I know it's goofy. The next stage will be the pupal stage, when they form a chrysalis, and that's when their body undergoes a total rearrangement. They break down a bunch of the tissue and they rebuild the tissue, and that's when they no longer will breathe through their butt, but they will breathe through the exoskeleton like a regular adult insect. Think of it as like a snorkel. That's what they're breathing through, and that's that unique structure at the tip of their tails, because again, that's how they're breathing. Yeah, it's a very unique way of having that breathing work. And so whenever we do our school visits, I always tell kids it's like they're breathing through their butt. So Curtis, we think it is because they can point their bodies down to feed, but have their tails up and still continue breathing. And so it's so they can do both at the same time. You can see like right here the pumping, the contracting of the gut tissue as they're processing their food. Fruit fly larvae also breathe through their tails. They're called the sphericals. Many larval species will do that. And one suspicion that we have for that is because, like with larvae, again, they're digging down into their food, and then as they dig down into their food, they can keep eating and not have to come up for air, which is quite remarkable if that's a feature of it. It's really cool with fruit fly is that there are some species that have larger, more snorkel-like appendages, and the reason we think it's like that is in part because of predatory wasps. So ones that would normally infect these larvae and like inject an egg that develops inside the larva and eventually hatches out of it. We suspect the reason that they're able to do something like this is if a wasp comes and is trying to infect those larvae, right, then they can burrow deeper, but they can have this little telescope that they can breathe through. We found one species that hadn't been classified in Hawaii when I was an undergrad, but as soon as we shifted it to the media in the lab, they did the little telescope behavior and then they all died because because the standard fruit fly medium in the lab is not really standardized for everything. It's standardized for like certain species of animal. You know, it's for Drosophila melanogaster, and that's what makes it difficult to keep them alive. There's the more feeding behavior happening. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep these mosquitoes in the tube that I have. They will have a lid on it, so they will not be getting out. They end up pupating, so they undergo metamorphosis just like a caterpillar would. And what's really gnarly about that is we can see them developing, and they stay on top of the water. They stay on top of the water after they've undergone metamorphosis, and they breathe through like much more of the top of the, they stay on the top of the water to breathe in that extra oxygen there. So yeah, the chrysalis floats. So if you were to leave out a bucket of water, you see the swimming motion that they have. The next day they would have a much more lack of any motion is what you end up seeing. And here, that's the brain. This component here and here are the optic lobes of the brain, and here are the sensory neurons going down. So that is actually, that water skippers, young skeeters, yes, these are the young mosquitoes, as you will. Yes, so these are, so you don't see the individual neurons, seeing the whole brain, but it's all right here. And actually, Andrew, if we rotate it, structurally, it's very similar to this. There are the optic lobes that are located here and here. This region of the brain is right here, and then this is the top of the brain, same as here. Some of these, like structures on this 3D printed brain, are different sizes. So for example, the optic lobe will be a different shape once this is finished undergoing metamorphosis. But the general overall structure of this is going to be very similar between these insects. So that is the brain. Again, we're not seeing the individual neurons. We're seeing bundles of them, but we are able to make it out in this. I'm going to keep the mosquitoes, the larvae, and we'll actually be able to watch them become the pupal stage on the stream. And so then Quoth, you will be able to show off what it looks like afterward.
What drink?